How does consciousness work in matter? How does it act? And how is it possible to distinguish different degrees of consciousness? With Burkhard Heim's six-dimensional model of the psyche, he brings these questions into the reach of physical consideration. And that's what this video is about. Hello and welcome to Six Dimensions in Color. My name is Schmid and I explain to you Burkhard Heim's worldview in understandable language and with clear examples. In the last video of this series, I talked about how and why the psyche consists of different non-material, like tier structural levels that are above the actual physical levels of biological beings. Above meaning here that these levels are intellectually higher. That is, they have a higher structural level, a higher x5 coordinate on Burkhard Heim's intellectual dimension. This non-material part of it, Heim called the Ilor, which is a kind of collector of sensory inputs and transforms them into physical actions. This video is the continuation of my work to make Burkhard Heim's model of the world available in English language and maybe a little more easy than in previous publications. I apologize for the long gaps in between videos. If you want to do what I do in between, check out the link in the description below and learn about the NATHAL training method. NATHAL intuition training is the world-class champion of all mental methods for personal and development and professional development. Develop your intuition, your emotional intelligence, and gain access to the source where all information and all knowledge come from. But now it's time to introduce some of Burkhard Heim's own word creations. You already know the word Ilor, which is short for intermittent lead metroplex of correlating properties, and which is kind of a synonym for the word psyche, but also applies to much simpler levels of being, like single molecules. You would never say they have a psyche, but they do have an Ilor. So let's speak generally of an Ilor. So I just mentioned sensory stimuli. If I set a stimulus on my body, like when I pinch my hand, then you could say the single cells of my tissue are being displaced. But the whole tissue is being displaced, and the whole sensation of being pinched at this place, that is like a rising meaning of the whole thing. The actual event of this pinching, it starts of course at the biological, at the molecular level, and you can say single enzymes and molecules, something happens to them, they move around and the cell membrane twists around and the cells are displaced. This is a rising level of meaning through these totalities of structure, through these x5 levels that my biological matrix is arranged into. And through this rising of meaning that is synonym with a stream of activities. You remember, activities are those non-material entities which are attached to any material structure, be it a single atom or a whole organism. So this increasing stream of meaning, of structure increasing, that Heim called an activity stream. It goes from the lowest biological level directly into my Ilor manual. And in the same manner, there are descending streams of activities, which are, well, that's the other hand basically, that puts a thought into action. The thought is the highest meaning, and it goes down into my tissue, into single cells, into single muscular fibers, into single proteins that are changing their volume. This is a descending stream of meaning, a descending stream of activities. A synchrometric structure with this property, Heim called a synchrocline, composed of centrometric, of course, and the Latin word clinare, meaning to incline or to be inclined. So something synchrometrically inclined along the axis x5, high, rising or falling. Metaphorically speaking, you can say it's a kind of channel. Of course, nothing flows in there like in a pipe. It's a metaphor, but a good one. The synchrocline system that docks onto the Ilor, Heim called the Ilor manual, because it's probably from manus, the hand, because it looks like a hand when these synchroclines extend there. And these special synchroclines, Heim called telecore synchroclines, because they act at a distance into the Ilor. So tele, acting at a distance, and Ilor, telecore synchroclines. And with this model, Heim went and categorized the different realms of biological beings. He sorted them by their number of synchroclines. And I will now first present his original view on that and then make some comments which should shed some more light on how to understand it. Let's start with the most simple form of biological entity, which are biological macromolecules, or also DNA. They are on a totalities of 7. They are on a totality 7, and their Ilor structure accordingly is on totality 16. It's always plus 9. It doesn't matter that there is nothing in between 7 and 16 here. You can either imagine that they are like empty metroplexes, that's like the zero element of centrometry, or more comprehensive, maybe this scale, this numbering of totalities is something that's quite arbitrarily put there. It's not a linear scale you have to go through. It's simply a classification. So in our classification system here, now 7 is attached to 16. There is one activity stream here, and this has just one function: to transport the property of the enzyme being first its incredibly improbable folding. It's one of the biggest riddles of biology, of how enzymes are properly folded without producing too much rubbish inside your cells. So it provides the correct folding and stability of the molecule, and also its catalytic property, or part of it at least. In the case of the DNA molecule, it's yet something else. I will talk about this in another video. And now you can imagine that more complex organisms than a molecule require a more complex synchrocline system. And this will lead us to Heim's power of 2 approach, which I will show you in a minute. And indeed, a more complex Ilor structure, of course, also means a more complex inner structure. And Heim had there again a system of synchroclines I will not go into in this video, but just to give you the basics, he also studied psychology and psychopathology to get the grasp on that, and he regarded the inner functioning of the Ilor as the exchange between 4 different motivational complexes, those being self-preservation, self-evolution, species preservation, and the 4th thing he called the captative motivations. That's everything connected to territorial behavior, but also hunting and playing behavior. But let's get back to our biological entities. From totalities 7 through 10, we have these simple life forms, starting at biochemical biomolecules, viruses, metabolic cycles, and even simple bacteria. They have in common that they are distinguishable from their purely chemical background of their surroundings, but they don't do much else than just function. This changes at totality 11, where we have the jump from prokaryotic cells to eukaryotic cells. That is, cells with a cell nucleus and a cytoskeleton. In Heim's view, this already qualified that the synchrocline, this one synchrocline, splits into 2. And it's not just about single cellular organisms. If they form social communities, they result in well, simple fungi, higher fungi, and plants, lower and higher plants. Their physical structure ranges from 11 through 13 in the case of higher plants. They have in common that they are bound to their environment. They cannot move around in any significant way, and any kind of movement is very slow what they can do. This changes on the next step, where the number of syntroclines splits into 4, and this already is the realm of simple animals, totality, biological totality 14. You would find things like jellyfish or worms, etc. here. And the next duplication step to a total of 8 syntroclines, that would be the higher animals. Heim here only assigned the higher primates, which can use sign language or simple tools and so, but I think, well, I'm coming to that, but I think he lacked some knowledge about animal psychology and behavior, which has only been researched in recent decades. So other high animals have to be put on this level as well. And from the kingdom of the higher animals, then emerges, of course, the human being with 16 syntroclines. And that's us. It's not quite what distinguishes us from the biological background of being, what like this sets us apart from everything else. I will talk about this in yet another video because it's something yet more complex. The point of this video is there are these increasingly complex streams of activities between the physical body and the immaterial ecostructure, and that qualifies for different or for rising degrees of consciousness. And I've summarized this in this table. So Heim goes from level 0 to level 4, and he has, as I said, this power of 2 approach, where every level, level 2 high, 2 to the power of the level, results in the number of syntroclines. It makes sense to distinguish levels because for any lower level, any level below your own existence, your own kind of being, it's inconceivable what you can do. For example, animals cannot conceive of how we use tools or how we build houses. And for plants, it's inconceivable of how animals can move around and bite off their leaves, etc. But if you stayed with me until here, you may have 2 questions. First, now what are these syntroclines actually? That sounds quite abstract, and is there any way of getting a better grasp of them? Yes, there is. I'm coming to that in a minute. And second, why this power of 2 approach? And isn't that a bit rigid? Well, yes, of course, it is a bit rigid, because there is I heard a lot of criticism in the past on my German channel already when I made this video and talked about this subject, that there are many higher animals that can do fantastic things like dolphins, elephants, intelligent birds that can talk and count, etc. So maybe we should go more into detail and see what these syntroclines actually are and how we can really recognize them in the different kinds of being that surrounds us. So, okay, what are the syntroclines? I half mentioned it already, because I said rising syntroclines are sensory inputs from the body. And I'm just going to count on myself now. I have 2 eyes, and each of my eyes is the starting point of one of my sensory syntroclines. To be more specific, the chromophoric enzymes in my retina, they are the starting point. The activity stream starts at these enzymes, goes into the cells of my retina, into the whole retina tissue, into the optic nerve, and into my visual cortex, where both streams of activities are combined into a conscious 3D stereoscopic image of my surroundings. So that's my first 2 syntroclines. The same, almost the same goes with my ears. I have two ears, which, if they function properly, I can hear directions of sounds, etc. It's also a stereoscopic auditory image of my surrounding. Well, auditory image, an audition of my surroundings. It's 4 rising central clients. Then I have a sense of smell, a sense of taste, I have a sense of touch, and a sense of balance. That's 8 rising central clients, and that quite well fits with Burkhard Heim's model, because he said humans should have 16 in total. Now, okay, half of it, that's already 8 central clients, 8 rising central clients. Now, what do I have on the side of falling central clients? It's everything I can do with my environment or with my body. Any way I can influence my surroundings. The first 2 are coarse motorics. It's 2 because obviously I have left and right side. I have a preference for one or the other side. Almost the same thing for fine motorics. We have to distinguish between coarse and fine motorics, because fine motorics are quite firmly associated with cultural things like using tools, like writing, and the more sophisticated mental stuff. Okay, 4 falling central clients so far. Then I have obviously a voice. I have the ability to sing. I won't do this now, don't worry. But singing is something a little else than using your voice, because it uses other parts of your body and other frequencies, let's say. That's 6 already. And then I have the ability to control the otherwise autonomous functions, like I can control my breathing, my expression, obviously, my sexuality. That's 7 falling streams of activities. And I'm not quite sure if you need to differentiate on these on the last mentioned thing between maybe between breathing, between expression. So it's debatable whether it's 7 or 8 falling central clients. That would mean in total it's either 15 or 16. But still, I would say Heim's model fits quite well. And now let's go and count on another organism. Okay, Kitty here has obviously, well, he has 2 eyes, that's 2 rising central clients already. Eyes including night vision, of course. He has 2 ears, which are, did you know cats can move around their ears with the help of 33 different muscles? Quite amazing hearing experience that must be. There's already 4 rising central clients. Cats have 2 centers for their sense of smell, one at the back of their nose and one at the back of their mouth. The latter is when you observe cats, that when they sit around and do this. So that's 2 rising central clients for scent. I'm already at 6. They have a sense of taste. That's number 7. He only eats the cat food that's pre-approved, of course. That's 7. A sense of balance, that's 8. And a sense of touch, like what the whiskers do. And that's even 9 rising central clients. Well, if I say humans have 8, that means he has an even higher awareness of his environment than humans do. And in fact, many animal sensual performances are so amazing that from this model it would be necessary to conclude that many animals have a higher awareness of their surroundings. That does not really fit Heim's model, but let's continue with the falling streams of activities. Okay, he also has coarse motorics, of course. That's 2 falling streams. I'm keeping my hand like that, or you won't like it. He has a voice, that's 3. And if you observe cats, a lot of their behavior is centered around leaving scent marks. They rub themselves around your legs, and they leave their spittle on any object. outside, hopefully only outside. They pee in every corner and they scratch on trees. That's leaving scent marks. And this is like a separate channel of communication, a channel to influence the environment. And that's 4 descending streams of activities. And in total, that's 13. So I said, Heims' model, if you look at the table, high animals should have 8, humans have 16, but he is obviously already in between. And I would say many high animals are somewhat in between here. And that means Heims' model is definitely too rigid, especially if it comes to the higher animals and where the number of counts is too high, is very high. The synchrocline count is very high because there's a huge gap between 8 and 16, obviously. So there is room to fit something in there. Let's also stop and look yet at the kingdom of plants. So plants should have 2 synchroclines according to Heim. Well, if you ask yourself what senses and what sense of action plants have, I believe they have a sense of light and dark and the ability to slowly move into the direction where it's better suited for them. Maybe not only light and dark, but also a chemical gradient would be maybe like the roots tasting where the best nutrients are. Growing is not an action that is expressed by a synchrocline. But these slow movements, they can be regarded as one falling synchrocline, and the sensations of the physical surroundings, maybe light and temperature, that's one rising synchrocline. There are exceptions, of course, where this moving around takes place somewhat faster, like in Venus flytraps. Maybe you could say that's already a 3rd synchrocline and some level in between plants and animals. But you see, this model at least roughly fits, and it sets very good cornerstones of the whole realm of biological beings. As I said, in higher animals you really have to have some knowledge about their psychology, their behavior, and that's something that Heim did not have available at his time. Alas, no model should ever be regarded as the ultima ratio of knowledge, not even Burkhard Heim's model. There is always room for questioning things and for improvement. And now one question remains, as I already mentioned, the question of what actually is it that sets us human beings apart from the rest of the biological organisms that we know on Earth, the thing that leaves this gap between the creation and us as a separate entity, so to speak. And that's something I'm going to talk about in the next video in 6 dimensions and in color.